This is Warhawk Beyond 2040, bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And February 17th, 2002 marks 23 years ago that history was made when the New World Order, also known as the NWO, comprised of Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, made their WWF debut at No Way Out 2002. And for today's special edition, I am going to be discussing the success and failures of the NWO's WWE run from February 2002 to July 2002. So, when the announcement was made that the NWO were coming in to WWF and they were going to be making their debut at No Way Out 2002, it sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling world because the NWO were a faction from WCW and they were a huge part of the Monday Night Wars and helping WCW Nitro to beat WWF Raw for 84 straight weeks in the ratings. And Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall are no strangers to the WWF. In fact, they all originally made their debuts in the WWF. Hulk Hogan, of course, it goes without saying, the biggest name ever in wrestling history, a true legend and a pop culture icon. And love him or hate him, he helped put wrestling on the map. Scott Hall competed in the WWF from 1992 to 1996 as Razor Ramon and was a four-time Intercontinental Champion and helped make history when he competed in the first ever ladder match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10. And Kevin Nash made his WWF debut in 1993 as Big Daddy Cool Diesel as the bodyguard of Shawn Michaels, and he won the Intercontinental title, the Tag Team titles, and the WWF World title, and was the World Champion for a full year from November 1994 to November 1995. So these guys collectively are wrestling history, three of the most important names in wrestling history. So my reaction to the NWO coming into the WWF, I was very excited. I thought, holy cow, this is going to be absolutely insane because I knew who the NWO were. I knew their history. I know what they did in WCW. So I thought, my God, this is going to be so epic. And I remember everyone in my secondary school was just buzzing about the idea of Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall coming into the WWF. What kind of impact were they going to make? What were they going to do? It was just so much excitement, and it definitely made No Way Out 2002 a must see pay per view because that was when these guys were going to be appearing on WWF TV. So, how this all came about was Ric Flair and Vince McMahon were co owners of the WWF, and they had a match at the Royal Rumble 2002, which was a street fight, and it was surprisingly a very good match. Ric Flair defeated Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon couldn't handle the fact that he lost to Ric Flair, and he resented the fact that he had to share ownership with Ric Flair. So Vince McMahon promised that he was going to deliver a nuclear bombshell. This bombshell was going to shake wrestling to its core and change the foundation forever. Yeah, we've heard this sort of thing before, but that's what Vince McMahon promised. Little did we know that this nuclear bombshell was going to really change everything. We had no idea what it was going to be, but we didn't have to wait long. to find out what this nuclear bombshell Vince McMahon had in store. So on SmackDown, we were treated to a series of weird, creepy vignettes from Vince McMahon, who sat in this dark room praying and rattling on like a psychotic madman, saying things like, "You leave me no choice. I'm going to have to do something that even I will regret. But it's got to be done. It's got to be slow. It's got to be swift. I'm not going to let Ric Flair kill what I created. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to inject the WWF with a lethal dose of poison. If anybody's going to kill my creation, I'm going to do it." And then Vince McMahon spun his chair around, and we saw on the back of his chair painted the NWO. Holy smokes, this was massive. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall were coming to the WWF, and we wouldn't really see them until No Way Out. So Vince McMahon had promised that he was going to inject a lethal dose of poison into the company. He was going to kill his own company with the NWO. Ric Flair, of course, would try to talk him out of it. Vince said, "Nope, my mind's already made up. The NWO are coming in and they're going to destroy my company until I'm the last person standing." And he gave Ric Flair an ultimatum: give up your ownership of the company and the NWO won't come in. But if you refuse, I'm bringing these guys in and that's it. It's all over. Ric Flair, of course, was defiant. He said, "Nope, I'm not giving up my share. If you want to bring the NWO in, be my guest." Mamma mia. So the NWO made their debut at WWF No Way Out 2002. They opened the show. They got a massive pop. And it was a little bit strange because, first of all, we're seeing the NWO in a WWF ring. That in itself was insane. And they came across as idiots saying that we're here to help the WWF. We don't want to kill it. We're just happy to be here. I didn't buy it. Nobody bought it. And Hulk Hogan, of course, got a massive pop. Scott Hall got a big pop with his "Hey Yo." And Kevin Nash got a pretty good pop as well. So the fans were, for the most part, very pleased to see these guys. However, backstage, not so much. A lot of wrestlers were against the idea of the NWO coming in because, after all, this was the same group of guys that tried to put WWF out of business. They helped WCW Nitro beat WWF Raw in the ratings for 84 straight weeks during the Monday Night Wars. Why would you be happy to bring these guys in? So they would have run ins with Stone Cold and The Rock. So it's obvious that there were seeds planted to feud with WWF's two biggest stars. And the NWO didn't waste any time in making an impact. They would cost Stone Cold the WWF Undisputed title against Chris Jericho, deliver a beatdown, and sprayed NWO on Stone Cold's back. The NWO, the poison, had officially arrived. And then the next night on Raw, The Rock would challenge Hollywood Hulk Hogan to a match at WrestleMania 18 in a classic icon versus icon match. And this was after Hulk Hogan absolutely savaged the fans and accused them of turning on him when he left the WWF. Hulk Hogan, of course, accepted the match. Rock delivered a rock bottom, and Hall and Nash would come out and absolutely destroy The Rock, delivering all of their finishing moves. the jackknife powerbomb, the outsider's edge, a leg drop, hammers, wrenches, you name it. The NWO absolutely destroyed The Rock, and then Hulk Hogan would drive a truck into The Rock's ambulance. Yep, the NWO were off to an amazing start. These guys were absolutely vicious. But something was different about the NWO. Yes, they did get off to a strong start. They took out The Rock, they took out Stone Cold, but something seemed a bit off. Now, anybody who followed the NWO when they were in WCW, they ran the show with an iron fist. They did what they wanted, when they wanted. They had full control creatively of the show. They just ran roughshod. However, WWF was a different story. Yes, they did get off to a strong start, but it didn't quite feel like the classic NWO we know. Yes, they sprayed the NWO graffiti on Stone Cold's back. They destroyed The Rock. What's wrong? What was wrong was it didn't feel like classic NWO. Maybe at first it did, but they just felt like another heel faction. You didn't really feel like, oh my god, this isn't supposed to be happening. Now, take the WCW run of the NWO. When Hall and Nash showed up, they showed up as outsiders to invade WCW. You never saw WWF guys on WCW TV. That's what made it work. And obviously, it's well documented that Hulk Hogan turning heel was absolutely nuclear. And as I said already, the NWO just completely ran roughshod over everything and everyone. Here in the WWF, yes, as I said, they got off to a strong start, but it wasn't quite the same. But they were still cool. Sold a lot of t-shirts. They were over, red hot, but not quite the same because all of the stuff they did before had already been done. What they were doing in WWF wasn't really much different to what they were doing in WCW. So they would humiliate Spike Dudley, and then they would mix it up with Stone Cold and The Rock in an epic 3-on-2 handicap match. I still think Triple H should have been part of that match. I mean, that would have been something. Monday Night Wars in the main event. Whew, that would have been something. But at the same time, while the NWO did come out on top, you can't help but feel that what if the NWO had come earlier? Maybe in 2001, perhaps, during the invasion angle? Now that would have been something. But they were still off to a strong start. They were still kicking ass, but not quite the same. So at WrestleMania 18, it was Stone Cold versus Scott Hall and The Rock versus Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Now, I heard somewhere that the original plan for Stone Cold versus Scott Hall was Scott Hall was going to go over and win the match due to interference from Vince McMahon and Kevin Nash. But for some strange reason, the finish got changed and Stone Cold ended up going over and picking up the victory. The match itself was pretty boring. You know, I wasn't expecting it to be a 5-star match like he had with The Rock the previous year at WrestleMania 17, but I was still expecting a good old fashioned, hard hitting brawl. We didn't get that. Kevin Nash had no match. Personally, I would have preferred if Kevin Nash faced Kane. You know, two of the biggest men, Kane versus Kevin Nash. That would have been a great match, but Kevin Nash was on the show, but he didn't have a match, which was stupid, really. The Rock versus Hollywood Hulk Hogan was excellent. Match of the night. Two of the biggest stars in wrestling history absolutely tore the house down. So much so that the fans ended up booing The Rock and cheering Hollywood Hulk Hogan, the heel. But it was an excellent match. The action, the crowd, the atmosphere, everything. 5-star match. Easily the match of the night and one of the best matches of 2002. The Rock would win the match. Rock and Hulk Hogan would shake hands. Fans popped. Hall and Nash come out. They would turn on Hulk Hogan, attack him, and this would lead to Hulk Hogan getting kicked out of the NWO, and The Rock would make the save, and this would officially cement Hulk Hogan as a babyface once again. And this would help further cement that status as the next night on Raw after WrestleMania 18, Hulk Hogan would officially sever all ties with the NWO by ripping his NWO shirt in Hulk Hogan style, thanks to the encouragement from The Rock. And this would lead to a feud with The Rock and Hulk Hogan versus Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Now, here's where the failures start to set in pretty fast. Hulk Hogan leaving the NWO and becoming a babyface once again, the NWO would lose that spark and they would start to lose their magic very quickly. You still had Hall and Nash, the outsiders, but the writing was on the wall. But there would be some little moments where the NWO would get their strength back, but you could sense that they were on borrowed time. So on SmackDown, we would see The Rock versus Kevin Nash. It would end with a DQ. Rock would end up getting powerbombed for a table. Hulk Hogan would come to the rescue, clean house, and then we would see the return of X-Pac, who was all decked out in NWO colours, lay out Hulk Hogan with a steel chair, and then we would see X-Pac, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall completely destroy Hulk Hogan and giving him a taste of his own medicine by spraying the NWO graffiti over Hulk Hogan's back. The NWO, as Michael Cole would say, were more poisonous than ever. So, X-Pac returning to rejoin his click buddies, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, as the newest member of the NWO. Now, to a lot of long-time wrestling fans, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise. X-Pac is friends with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, and he was a part of the NWO back in WCW when he was called Six, because he was the sixth member of the NWO. So it looked like the NWO was back on top. You know, X-Pac was back in the fold, and they had nuclear heat because, you know, X-Pac is not exactly loved by WWF fans. And then we would see the following week on Raw is War, we would see Kane join this feud, and we would see him team up with Hulk Hogan and The Rock on SmackDown to face the NWO in a 6-man tag. And we would also see The Rock and Hulk Hogan get drafted to SmackDown, while the NWO would get drafted to Raw as a unit, and they would continue to feud with Kane. And this would lead to Kane getting unmasked and brutally taken out by all 3 members of the NWO. And we would see X-Pac come out on Raw every week wearing Kane's mask as a symbol that he was the one who took out his former tag team partner. This would lead to Kevin Nash getting suspended indefinitely, but in real life he was actually injured. This would leave just Hall and X-Pac as the only 2 NWO members. So now you've lost Hulk Hogan. He's now on SmackDown as a babyface doing his Hulkamania thing. Kevin Nash was in storyline suspended indefinitely, but in real life he was injured. So you're now left with 2 NWO members. And not to be horrible to Scott Hall and X-Pac, the NWO were quickly becoming a shell of its former self. Yes, they would still impose their will, but they were no longer the big threat they were just a couple months earlier. Big Show would join the NWO, and this would bring the NWO back on top a little bit, but again, the writing was on the wall. Ric Flair would turn heel. He would join the NWO. Scott Hall would get fired in real life. So this left just X-Pac and the Big Show. And we would see Flair and the Big Show team up to face Stone Cold at Judgment Day 2002 in a 2-on-1 handicap match where Stone Cold was able to pick up the victory. So another loss for the NWO as a faction. And all due respect to Ric Flair, I respect him. He's one of wrestling's true legends. But let's be real here. He had no business being in the NWO, especially as the NWO made his life miserable in WCW for years. And now he was with them. It was just stupid and it made zero sense whatsoever. And I don't even think we got a proper explanation as to why he was with these guys in the first place. Oh my God, talk about desperation. And you could really see things were starting to fall apart fast. And we would see Booker T join the NWO after he was handpicked and recruited by Ric Flair. And I love Booker T. He is one of wrestling's true legends, and he is a fantastic wrestler. But let's be real here. Let's be honest. He had no business being part of the NWO, especially as he feuded with them in WCW for a little while. He even had a feud against Kevin Nash. It was just stupid. And this is where the NWO went from being this very intimidating faction who you wouldn't dare cross. They just became a laughing stock. And that's coming from a big NWO fan. You know, Scott Hall's gone. Hulk Hogan's gone. Nash is injured. I'm hardly going to rely on X-Pac, as talented as he is, to generate interest. Big Show, yeah, he's great. He's a great giant, but come on now. Really. Booker T, as talented as he is, he just doesn't work in the NWO. He works better against them. That's the point. So we would see Goldust trying to join the NWO. We would see him trying to convince Booker T to bring him in. Yeah, this is where things start to really get stupid. Are you telling me this is the same NWO that humiliated and embarrassed Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen on a weekly basis? Are you telling me this is the same guys who powerbombed Eric Bischoff off the stage? This is the same faction, graffitied WCW equipment and vehicles? Come on now. This is not the same poisonous NWO that we all know from the 1990s. And then Kevin Nash would make his return and declare himself as the leader of the NWO. He would officially make Booker T a new member. So it looked like the NWO was not only back on the same page, but now they were back on top. But Kevin Nash said that he was going to make a huge announcement. And that huge announcement was none other than his longtime best friend, the Heartbreak Kid himself, Shawn Michaels, who is now part of the NWO. Now, I've talked about this before, and I'm not going to go into too much here, but I love Shawn Michaels. He's one of my all time favourite wrestlers. He's in my top three. He's a Mount Rushmore guy, 100%. He's a DX guy. Having Shawn Michaels in the NWO was odd. It really was. That's like having Hulk Hogan in DX. It just doesn't look right. But I understand why HBK was brought in. They needed that shot on the arm. They needed that star power. And there's no bigger star to have in your group than HBK himself, Shawn Michaels. But the writing was on the wall. The cracks were really starting to show. And I can't help but feel that bringing in Shawn Michaels was like their last desperate attempt to bring interest back into this dying group. And it did work for a few weeks, as we would see Shawn Michaels have Booker T kicked out of the NWO after he delivered Sweet Chin Music to him. And it was very clear that with the addition of Shawn Michaels, the NWO were really trying to get that serious edge back into the group, which, quite frankly, in my opinion, was desperately needed at this stage. They had the storyline where the NWO were trying to recruit Triple H after they met up with him at the King of the Ring. Yeah, that storyline collapsed, and Kevin Nash got hurt again. Sorry, had to get that out there. And that was pretty much it, really. As we would see the following week, Vince McMahon would come out in NWO music and tell the fans that that would be the last time you would ever hear the NWO music played on WWE TV, as he announced that the NWO were disbanded for good and declared them dead. Wow. After all that, they may as well have been dead. As far as I'm concerned, the NWO died long before Vince McMahon made that announcement. And let's face it, the NWO were pretty much a shell of their former self, which is sad, to be honest. So X Pac would get released, Big Show would be on his own, Shawn Michaels would return to the ring. The NWO were officially no more. And it's such a shame, really, because they came in at No Way Out 2002. First couple of months, they started out really strong. They feuded with The Rock and they feuded with Stone Cold, and they were off to an amazing start. But once they got to WrestleMania 18, yeah, they just completely collapsed. And as each month went along, it just got worse and worse. There would be some fleeting moments. Kevin Nash would come back. He would bring Shawn Michaels in, and it looked like they were on their way up. And then Kevin Nash gets hurt again. So I think they did the right thing disbanding the NWO because, let's face it, it was just getting embarrassing for everyone involved. So it would have been interesting to see whether or not Triple H would have actually joined. I did hear that the original plan was, before Nash got hurt, that Triple H would reject joining the NWO. This would infuriate Nash, and this would lead to a match at SummerSlam 2002, Kevin Nash versus Triple H. Thank God we did not get that. I'm so glad we got Shawn Michaels versus Triple H, and it was an excellent feud, and their matches were great. But I still would have liked to have seen the payoff for, the whole Triple H and NWO storyline. Just would have been nice to see what would have happened, really. So, in terms of the success and failures of the NWO's WWE 2002 run, a complete, utter failure. And this is coming, as I said earlier, from a big NWO fan. They had good intentions, you know, the heart was there, but the execution was at first very good, but it just was a huge letdown. If they had brought in the NWO a year before, in 2001, after WCW was bought out, maybe we could have had a different story. Maybe things could have turned out differently. But yeah, sorry to say. It was fun while it lasted, but once Scott Hall was gone, yeah, I lost interest very quickly. And Hulk Hogan, even though I'm not the biggest Hogan fan, at least he did generate interest. Kevin Nash tried, but what are you going to do? Shawn Michaels in the NWO, not a good idea. He's a DX guy. He works better in DX. Don't get me wrong, it was great to see HBK back, but seeing him in the NWO was just weird and very awkward. But what are you going to do? But yes, the NWO 2002 WWE run was a complete failure. And do you find it interesting that after their run in 2002, they never brought these guys back. Sure, they would have a couple of little mini reunions years later in 2014 onwards. Yeah, they never gave these guys another run, and quite frankly, I think it's best they didn't. I personally would rather remember the NWO for their WCW run. The WWE run, on paper, was epic, but in reality, the execution was a huge disappointment. Sorry to say, but it's the truth. It is what it is. I think everyone would agree with me that the NWO WWE 2002 run was a huge letdown. Such a shame, really, because this could have been massive if it was booked right. But better take that up with Vince. He's the one who booked it, and yeah, well, it's not his creation, so why should he care? Never mind. So anyway, that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of the NWO WWE 2002 run? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was a success or a failure? What was your favourite moments? Did you like seeing Shawn Michaels in the NWO? Do you think the NWO got off to a strong start? Do you think Hulk Hogan leaving the NWO was a bad blow? Do you think Scott Hall getting fired was a bad blow? And also, how would you have booked the NWO's WWE run in 2002? Would you have done it differently? Would you have given them a longer run, perhaps? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.